August 9th, 1588, Tilbury, England. A Spanish fleet of 130 ships is sailing toward the English coast. 30,000 soldiers ready to invade, the largest armada ever assembled. England is outgunned, outmanned, terrified. And on the muddy fields of Tilbury, a 54-year-old woman rides out to face her troops. She's wearing a silver breastplate over a white velvet gown, a sword at her side, no guards. She speaks.
I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king.
Her name is Elizabeth. She refused to marry, refused to name an heir, refused to be anything other than England itself. This is the story of how a woman turned her greatest weakness into a weapon and the prison she built for herself in the process. I'm Arthur, and this is Shadow History. This video uses AI to reconstruct Elizabeth I, her court, and the Tudor world she inherited. The images are AI, the history is documented. Let me show you the queen who chose power over love and paid the price. To understand Elizabeth, you need to meet her at 2 years old. May 19th, 1536, the Tower of London. Her mother, Anne Boleyn, is beheaded. Elizabeth is too young to remember the execution, but she'll spend her entire life living with its consequences. Within weeks, Parliament declares her illegitimate, a bastard, erased from the line of succession. Her father, Henry VIII, barely acknowledges her existence. She's moved from palace to palace, her household stripped down, her status uncertain. One day she's a princess, the next she's nobody. She learns early, to be visible is to be vulnerable. To have a clear claim to power is to paint a target on your back. Her half-sister Mary becomes queen in 1553. Mary is Catholic, paranoid, desperate to restore England to Rome. And Elizabeth? She's Protestant, popular, a threat. In 1554, Elizabeth is arrested, accused of plotting against Mary. She's 20 years old. They take her to the Tower of London, the same tower where her mother died. According to records, Elizabeth refuses to enter through the Traitor's Gate. She sits in the rain, water soaking her dress, and says,
Here landeth as true a subject, being prisoner, as ever landed at these stairs.
She's terrified, but she knows the game. Show fear and you're guilty. Show defiance and you're dead. So she shows nothing. For 2 months, she's imprisoned, interrogated. Every question is a trap. Every answer could be her last. But Elizabeth has learned something her mother never mastered: invisibility. She doesn't deny. She doesn't confess. She becomes a ghost.
I know nothing of this matter, my lords.
Present but untouchable. Accused but unproven. Mary can't execute her without evidence, and Elizabeth gives her nothing. She survives. November 17th, 1558. Mary dies, childless, broken. And Elizabeth, the illegitimate princess, the prisoner, the girl everyone underestimated, becomes Queen of England at 25 years old. She's inherited a kingdom on the brink of collapse. Catholic versus Protestant, England versus Spain, bankruptcy, rebellion, and everyone, every lord, every ambassador, every priest has the same demand: marry, produce an heir, secure the succession. Elizabeth has watched her father marry 6 times. She's seen her mother beheaded, her stepmother, Catherine Howard, executed, her cousin, Lady Jane Grey, killed at 16. She's learned the lesson they all paid for with their lives. Marriage is a cage, an heir is a target. power shared is power lost. So when Parliament gathers in 1559 and demands she marry, Elizabeth gives them an answer that will define her reign. Watch what she does next. 1559. The House of Commons gathers. They have one demand: the Queen must marry. Their reasoning is simple. England needs an heir. The succession must be secured. A woman cannot rule alone. Every ambassador in Europe is watching. Potential suitors are already being discussed. King Philip II of Spain, Elizabeth's former brother-in-law, Archduke Charles of Austria, the Swedish prince Eric. The pressure is enormous. Elizabeth stands before Parliament, 25 years old, unmarried, alone. She speaks.
I am already bound to a husband, which is the kingdom of England.
Think about that. She doesn't say, I will marry soon. She doesn't say, I'm considering my options. She says she's already married to England itself. It's a brilliant answer. It's poetic. It sounds religious, like a nun taking vows. But it's also a lie. Because what she's really saying is, I will never share power, not with a husband, not with anyone. Parliament doesn't believe her. They think she's buying time, that eventually she'll choose someone. They're wrong. For the next 40 years, Elizabeth will play the marriage game like a master chess player. She'll consider proposals, receive ambassadors, flirt with foreign princes, let negotiations drag on for years. But she'll never say yes.
We shall consider, perhaps in time, not at present. No, no, no.
Why? Because she's watched what marriage does to queens. Her mother, Anne Boleyn, married to Henry VIII, beheaded when she failed to produce a son. Catherine Howard, married to Henry VIII, beheaded for adultery. Her sister, Mary, married to Philip II of Spain. He used her to try to drag England into Spanish wars, then abandoned her when she couldn't give him an heir. Her cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots, married 3 times. The first husband died young, the second was murdered, the third destroyed her reputation and cost her the throne. Marriage for a queen is poison. Elizabeth sees this, and she makes a calculation. An unmarried queen is dangerous, yes, but she's also powerful. Because as long as she might marry, every king in Europe has a reason to court England's favor. As long as her hand is available, she can dangle the possibility of alliance without ever committing to one. Her refusal to marry becomes her greatest diplomatic weapon. Spain wants her to marry a Catholic. She'll let them think she's considering it, while secretly supporting Protestant rebels in the Netherlands. France wants her to marry one of their princes. She'll flirt with the idea for a decade, while never actually signing a treaty. Her virginity becomes a political strategy. The Virgin Queen, married only to her people. It's genius. But there's one problem. She's human, and humans have hearts. Comment below. Do you think Elizabeth ever wanted to marry for love?
There was one man Elizabeth wanted to marry, Robert Dudley. They'd known each other since childhood. He was handsome, charming, ambitious. They rode together, danced together. He was her constant companion at court. The court whispered. The ambassadors wrote home, "The Queen is in love."
The Queen is in love with Lord Robert. She shows him extraordinary favor. The secret is no secret. All Europe knows.
And she was. But there was a problem. Robert Dudley was already married to a woman named Amy Robsart. Then, in September 1560, something happened that would haunt Elizabeth for the rest of her life. Amy Robsart was found dead at the bottom of a staircase. her neck broken. Accident or murder? Rumors exploded across Europe. People said Dudley had his wife killed so he could marry the Queen. Some even whispered that Elizabeth had ordered it herself. There was no proof. The inquest ruled it an accident, but the damage was done. If Elizabeth married Dudley now, the world would believe she was complicit in murder. Her reputation, already fragile as an unmarried queen, would be destroyed. She couldn't marry him, not without confirming every conspiracy theory about her. According to court records, she told him, "I will make you great. I will make you my eyes and ears, but I cannot make you my husband." She gave him everything except the one thing he wanted. She made him Earl of Leicester, gave him castles, land, power, kept him at her side for nearly 30 years, but she never married him. And it broke something in her, because this is the truth Elizabeth would never admit. She wanted both. She wanted power and she wanted love, but she couldn't have both. Not as a queen, not in the 16th century. So she chose power, and she spent the rest of her life surrounded by younger men, her favorites, who flattered her, danced with her, reminded her of what she'd sacrificed. Robert Dudley died in 1588, just days after the Armada. Elizabeth kept his last letter in a box beside her bed for the rest of her life. On the outside, she wrote, "His last letter." She never married, never had children, never let anyone share her throne. She became the greatest queen England had ever known, but she did it alone. And here's the thing about being alone at the top. You're exposed. Because while Elizabeth was playing the marriage game, refusing suitors, building her legend, another queen was watching. Mary, Queen of Scots. Catholic, married, a mother. Everything Elizabeth was not. And Mary had a claim to Elizabeth's throne. This is where it gets dangerous.
She wants your throne. 2 queens, 1 kingdom. This ends.
Mary, Queen of Scots, was everything Elizabeth pretended not to care about. Mary was beautiful, married, a mother, a Catholic with royal blood, and a legitimate claim to the English throne. And after her disastrous reign in Scotland ended in 1568, Mary fled south and threw herself on Elizabeth's mercy. Big mistake. Elizabeth didn't help her, she imprisoned her for 19 years. Think about that. Elizabeth kept her cousin locked in various castles across England for nearly 2 decades. Why? Because Mary alive was useful. Mary was the symbol of Catholic hope, the rightful queen waiting to be restored. As long as Mary lived, every Catholic plot against Elizabeth had a figurehead. And as long as Mary was imprisoned, Elizabeth could use her as leverage, a threat to keep Catholic powers in check, a prisoner to prove Protestant England's strength. But plots kept coming. The Ridolfi plot in 1571, the Throckmorton plot in 1583, each one trying to assassinate Elizabeth and put Mary on the throne. Then came the Babington plot in 1586. This time they had evidence, letters between Mary and the conspirators, plans to murder Elizabeth, Mary's explicit approval. Elizabeth's counselors, led by William Cecil and Francis Walsingham, demanded Mary's execution. The law was clear: treason, death. But Elizabeth hesitated, because to execute a crowned queen was unprecedented. It was sacrilege. It said that monarchs could be killed for political crimes. It broke the divine fiction that crowned heads were sacred. For months, Elizabeth refused to sign the death warrant. Her counselors begged. Parliament demanded it. The people wanted blood. Finally, in February 1587, Elizabeth signed. But according to reports, even after signing, she tried to delay. She wanted someone else to take responsibility. She wanted plausible deniability. The warrant was rushed to Fotheringhay Castle before she could change her mind. On February 8, 1587, Mary, Queen of Scots, was beheaded. She wore a red dress, the Catholic color of martyrdom. She forgave her executioner.
Forgive me.
I forgive you with all my heart.
It took 2 blows. When news reached Elizabeth, she was furious. Not because Mary was dead, because she'd been forced to publicly order it. She raged at her counselors, claimed they'd acted without her full consent, even imprisoned the man who delivered the warrant. It was theater. Everyone knew it. But the crack in Elizabeth's perfect legend had appeared. She'd killed a queen, a cousin, a woman who, like her, had been used and betrayed by powerful men. And the Catholic world wanted revenge. Spain began assembling the largest invasion fleet in history. The Armada was coming. Remember the woman in armor at Tilbury? Now you know what brought her there.
Elizabeth I died as she lived, alone, in control, and legend. She refused to marry, refused to name an heir, refused to be anything other than England itself. For 45 years, she turned her greatest weakness, being a woman in a man's world, into her ultimate strength. She survived assassination plots, defeated the Spanish Armada, transformed England into a Protestant power. But the price was everything human. No husband, no children, no partnership, no love. She built a legend so powerful it's lasted over 400 years. But inside that legend was a woman who died alone, having sacrificed her heart for her crown. Was it worth it? History says yes. Elizabeth became Gloriana, the greatest queen England ever knew. But Elizabeth herself, she took that answer to her grave. The past never apologized.